working today? Okay. All right. You had to get us in the ride. I'm sorry. What's going on? How are you doing? What are you doing here? No. Right. Right. It's very robotic now. There's very little room for artistic teachers like you and I. I mean, you got to really get creative and be artistic. Yeah. Right. Yes. So historically, you would know better. Where did this come from? This idea that we need to do this. And right now. Yeah. Check. Right. Yeah. I'm gonna get some water too. Is that empty, Mike? You want some too, do you?
Got a little bottle and got spike it on us. You spike it and they see what you're
I don't know what's on the agenda that's so high.
No, it's not the staffing report.
No, it's the wrong group.
Oh. I got this hot off the presses. Look at this number here.
Oh, thank you. Now, did you have your SDDN pretty much eaten out of your hand? Yeah. When I talked to Rothel, he said, that's what Rothel said. Rothel said, you got to do it. That you need that group with you.
I get stuck in
Right.
She said, let's just drop the teacher.
Right.
So I brought her teacher friends in.
Right.
I said, what? No, say. He's like,
Right. Right. So that might like the same thing we do. I can do this with my eyes closed, but for some reason,
Yeah.
it's like, dear God. I said, well, if we develop a proposal, we just work with
It's like I practice all week and get ready. And
Right. Right. Yeah. That's our switch. Right. But if we try to do proposal, it's probably RFP. Unless you can convey the church. Right. Which is very true. And that's how I know. And I figured that was a legitimate.
diversity of the conference is represented.
Where's that?
Asbury's got 3. KSU's beating them.
Actually, you look at Cumberland's got pretty good teaching staff.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the October 27th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, the board held work sessions to discuss the 2015 legislative priorities and the Professional Growth and Effectiveness System Certified Evaluation Plan. We will have our traditional moment of silence, and then we'll stand for the pledge, and then Board Member Hadaway will do our vision statement. So would you please join me now for a moment of silence? Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board Member Hadaway.
Our vision statement. All JCPS students graduate prepared to reach their full potential and contribute to our society throughout life.
Thank you very much. At this time, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 13th meeting? Mr. Hadaway, second. Ms. Haddad, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We will now move on to recognitions and resolutions. Ms. Terry Robinson.
Dr. Hargens, Board Chair Diane Porter, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Tonight, we have the honor of recognizing and celebrating the exemplary accomplishments of JCPS students and an outstanding school. First, we have the honor of recognizing more than 40 JCPS students from Atherton, Ballard, Brown, DuPont Manual, Eastern, and Pleasure Ridge Park High Schools who have been selected as 2015 National Merit Scholarship Program semifinalists and 2015 National Achievement Scholarship Program semifinalists. Finalists for both programs are selected based on their outstanding academic record throughout high school, endorsement and recommendation by a high school official, and earned SAT scores that confirm their performance on the preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test, National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, as well as their accomplishments, leadership, and participation in school and community activities. Board Chair Diane Porter, please come forward to extend congratulations to DuPont Manual High School students Ellen Baker, Ava Bradley, Alton Chansey, Rebecca Guan, Benjamin Johnsrud, Mark Kubiak, Francis Rorter, and Christopher Sizemore. Joining in the recognition is their principal, Jerry Mays. Thank you. Board Chair Diane Porter, please also congratulate Brown School student Kayla Krieger. Joining in the recognition is her principal, Tim Healy. Board Vice Chair David Jones Jr., please congratulate Atherton High School students Catherine Eldemeyer, Jeremy Jackson, and William Mandrola. Joining in the recognition is their principal, Dr. Thomas Aberly. Board member Debbie Westland, please congratulate Ballard High School students Mary Cecil, Joshua Coombe, Hunter Rings, Kevin Seo, and Leanna Spurrier. And also Hunter Rings and Bruce Northington. Joining in the recognition is their assistant principal, Rose Livingston. Ms. Westland, please also congratulate Eastern High School student Eric Honnard. Joining in the recognition is his principal, Lana Kalin. Board member Chuck Hadaway, please congratulate Pleasure Ridge Park High School student Reese Lamaster. Joining in the recognition is his principal, Kimberly Sawyer. At this time, I would like to ask all of the proud parents to please stand and be recognized. Thank you. Next, we are proud to recognize Stouffer Elementary for being named a 2014 National Blue Ribbon School by the U.S. Department of Education. The designation recognizes public and private elementary, middle, and high schools for overall academic excellence. The designation is also a national symbol of exemplary teaching and learning. Board member Chris Brady, please come forward to congratulate Dr. Bridget Owens, principal of Stouffer. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to receive the recognitions? Mr. Brady, second. Ms. Haddad, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. At this time, we take a break to allow you to leave we say to go home and continue your homework. But we really don't know what you're doing, but we want, before you leave, we want you to know how proud we are of you, and we congratulate you for all your hard work. So if you would take this opportunity to leave, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Yes. Okay. Basis program.
No, they touched more slots.
Right. All you.
Speaking of recruiting and staffing.
They're all out of order. So I'm trying to figure out which one, where it is. I know. What happened? Well, I mean, I had it on there, but I didn't have it clicked on. And they came out, and I just put them anyway. Except our head of HR. Do you
I
know?
guess you'll answer about that after you're done.
No, I think
Do
it's
you notice her striped bag matches?
Oh, that's
her
right. The
striped
contract. The
bag?
contract. The contract.
I said to her.
So at this time, we would like to move on with the consent calendar and the superintendent's report. Dr. Hargens?
Thank you, Chair Porter. Chair Porter, members of the board, it's my pleasure to call to your attention a few items of special interest. First, congratulations to Charlize Matthews, a Western High School senior who is selected to serve on Commissioner Terry Holliday's 1415 Next Generation Student Advisory Council, a group that provides input to the commissioner. The group will meet with the commissioner and the Kentucky Department of Education staff to discuss how decisions made at the state level affect public school students, and will also provide feedback on critical issues that impact Kentucky public schools. And of course, congratulations to Sarah Reed, third grade teacher at Field Elementary School, who is chosen as this year's Kentucky Teacher of the Year. Ms. Reed will now represent Kentucky in the 2015 National Teacher of the Year competition. And we will actually have her at another board meeting, but we wanted certainly to recognize Ms. Reed. And when she sent me an email, I asked her if I could share the quote. It's called More. The more you read, the more you know. The more you know, the smarter you grow. The smarter you grow, the stronger your voice when speaking your mind or making your choice. So what a great selection, and we're so proud of Sarah. I had promised that I would bring back improvements that we've made based on the audit review. And Finding 18 said that we lacked a comprehensive and centralized manual of procedures, and I can show you that if you go to the web page about JCPS, there is a link called JCPS Board Policy Manual. And what you'll see is all of the policies, and you can see on the left side, if there is a procedure or a regulation attached with the policy, you can find it on the left side. So in this particular example, the policy is about school activity funds. So obviously what's attached are the procedures, the Red Book for Kentucky school activity funds. So the whole point of this is to make sure that everything is readily accessible to every employee. So I appreciate people getting that together. And we've been in the process of revising every board policy, but bringing the procedures and regulations along with the policy connects them for every employee and for the public. And then in Finding 26, it was found that internal audit has not prepared an audit plan or implemented a risk-based audit approach. And the board was presented a draft, was submitted to the board in the October 10th Friday update. So we have presented a draft audit plan for the board's review. One of the other findings was 39. JCPS implemented a weak and inadequate password policy. So we can report to the board that a phased approach of a password change procedure is currently being implemented for staff, and a document procedure has been created and will reside in that same centralized manual of procedures. And it is automated through the Active Directory. So as I promised, during every superintendent's report, I will report at least 3 things that we've already completed. At the work session, I want to thank the EQUOC members, the Educator Quality Oversight Committee, and all the work they've done on presenting a draft of the Certified Evaluation Plan. So the teachers have an evaluation system, TPGES. The principals have an evaluation system, PPGES, and on the board, we're asking for approval tonight of the superintendent's evaluation system, SPGES. So we'll all be aligned with all our acronyms. And also I point to your attention in the bid award is an award to Heritage Petroleum for diesel fuel. Based on the prices we have paid and the price of diesel fuel on Friday, we estimate a savings of $1.6 million this year. So Chairwoman Porter, at this time, I recommend the consent calendar for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Harkins. Are there any items on the consent calendar that need to be pulled down for further discussion? Mr. Brady?
Item S.
Ms. Duncan, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Q8.
Mr. Hadaway?
Q6 and Q9.
Others? Okay. I will say that there are no tie bids this evening, so we'll go on with the consent calendar. And the first item that was pulled down was Q6, the acceptance of funding from the Kentucky Governor's Office for the Everyone Reads Nurses Initiative. Mr. Hadaway.
Yes, Dr. Harkins, I was curious about this. How does the Everyone Reads ties in with nurses? And do you have some historical things you could share about this program?
And Ms. Harden, can you explain that initiative?
Yes, the Everyone Reads program we have been receiving from the state in the budget line item funding for Everyone Reads. The use of that for nurses initiative is the logic in that students need to be in school. And in order to read, obviously they've got to be there with the teachers to have that instructional base. So several years ago, what the board and the superintendent determined was nurses was a good initiative to actually apply that funding to. And the logic being when students have, say, maybe just a stomach ache or headache, whatever, they can go to the nurse. She can kind of evaluate their situation, and in many times it allows the student to stay instead of calling the parent to come pick the child up. So the child stays in school more often. Now, if they have a fever or something like that, there again, the nurse can evaluate that and determine if the parent needs to pick the child up because they are too sick to stay at school.
Do we know how many nurses this covers?
The average salary of a 195-day nurse is around $32,000, so approximately 7 nurses for this particular funding source.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next item that was pulled down is Q8, acceptance of funding from the University of Louisville for Westport Middle School. Ms. Duncan?
Yes, I'd just like a little bit of an elaboration on what those PLCs are going to look like at Westport. You know, we had a great discussion last meeting concerning our middle schools and how they're organizing their PLCs. And so I'm just curious about how Westport is going to be organizing their PLCs.
What we've done since that discussion, and we had really kind of already started, was gathering all the information on middle schools and what their professional learning communities look like. At Westport, they do content area-based professional learning communities twice a month. So they will be meeting as content areas, in other words, all the math team, all the science team in content areas twice a month, and hopefully this is Westport's part of the signature partnership with the University of Louisville, which received funding from the Oxley Foundation to provide small grants to the signature partnership schools, and hopefully there'll be some professional development around PLCs for Westport that would help the functioning of their PLCs to improve.
You know, that triggered my interest in talking with some of our schools, and I spoke with Olmsted North, and I also spoke with Lassiter, Mr. Sessler at Lassiter, and both of those principals are beginning to align their PLCs in a way that's heavily content-based instead of cross-team, although cross-team's still there, but it's not there 5 days a week. It's there, you know, on a basis that they need to touch base on. But I just thought with Lassiter, I know last year had a jump of about 8 points, and he really attributes that to the work that they've done in trying to be more deliberate about those content area PLCs. And so, it pays off, and I just hope that we can see that work being done in all of our middle schools. Yeah,
Lassiter participated in our DeFore pilot group of principals and schools, and certainly we saw great benefit among those schools, and Lassiter becomes a really good model for middle schools that in the past have been so interdisciplinary that now they can start to focus more on content area PLCs. So thank you.
I know Mr. Radowski at Olmsted North has begun that this year, and so we'll be anxious to see what kind of impact that has on scores. Thank you, Dr. Hensley.
Okay. The next item is Q9, acceptance of funding from the Kentucky Department of Education for alternative certification in secondary program. Mr. Hadaway.
Yes, I was encouraged to see this. I just would like for Mr. Marshall to explain, give me an overview of the program. I'm very happy that we are providing assistance for teachers to seek these alternative routes of certification, but I kind of wanted an overview of what the program is.
Okay, and I have Selena Fishback here in case it gets too deep where I can't answer. She can answer all of them. But the ACES program's been around more than 20 years, and it is exactly that, to provide alternative certification for aspiring teachers that already have a college degree but realize that they didn't choose correctly the first time, so they want to come back. Generally, it is an accelerated type of program where they get a battery of classes in an accelerated form to get their certification. They have to successfully pass the Praxis 2 requirements. They also have field experience and field studies. There's interviews with principals and school councils. So after they get their certification and they've made their Praxis requirements and they've done the college course load, and if I'm correct, there is accreditation to it, Ms. Fishback? There is accreditation to it. They're eligible to teach. We have a couple of ACES teachers that are here with us today. There's elementary school trainers or teachers, sometimes principals, sometimes teachers. A lot of ACES people that have graduated come back and teach, but it is very college-like but very accelerated in the sense that they have an intense summer, and then during the school year they have to go back and are asked to quit their real jobs and actually get back into school classes and the classes that they're helping to teach to get their alternative certification. This has helped, and Mike will talk more about it in his presentation, but this has helped a lot with our minority numbers as well.
That's wonderful. And you don't have to answer this now if you have to get the data, but I was curious if, the presentation here is 5 to 12 teachers. Is the demand larger than that, and that is a budgetary limit?
I'll look into that. Definitely we could have more. Some things to consider, but we definitely could. And historically, it has been bigger cohorts of classes, but we're trying to do slow and easy wins the race, so we want to do it right. But I'll look into it and get you the data historically as well.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. The next item is item S, approval of fundraising activities for 2014-15 school year. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is to the superintendent, and you can redirect to your staff if necessary. But looking through this list of fundraisers, I believe this is supposed to be a comprehensive list of fundraisers for all of our schools for board approval. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And just as a parent of a couple of kids that are in elementary school, I see my school on here, and there appears to be 2 fundraisers. And as a parent, it seems like there's a whole lot more than just 2 fundraisers that we're being asked to deal with. I'm curious as to whether or not this is really a comprehensive list, or if there's actually more on here, or if there should be more fundraisers listed here. Just looking through this, I only see a couple of high schools that are listed. I'm pretty sure there are multiple fundraisers, though those fundraisers might benefit a particular athletic team or band or something along those lines. But it seems to me that just as a cursory glance through this, it seems to be an awful small list.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Harden, how are we defining? We're defining the school-wide fundraiser.
Yes, this list is based on school-wide. Now, as far as like the cheerleading team, the band team, they may have individual fundraising activities for particular projects that organization may have. But these are school-wide. And
I've noticed that from my own experience, Scholastic seems to be, the book fair. That to me could possibly be a school-wide fundraiser, but that's not listed on here. There was another one I was thinking of. There's a lot of, we're asked to look at catalogs for food, and that's not listed on here. I had another one recently that was I believe it was some type of Christmas items. That's not listed on here. So there are at least 3 things off the top of my head, just for my one school that my boys go to, that I don't see listed here. Now, again, that might fall under some different category in how it's defined, but it appears from, at least from this parent's point of view, it's something that we're being asked to contribute to again and again and again. And I just don't see, this doesn't strike me as being a comprehensive list.
We'll follow up with the schools again to make sure that list is comprehensive and that they understand the definition of school-wide fundraisers versus just a particular activity that they are having for a specific purpose.
All right, thank you.
Okay, at this time, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Ms. Westland, second. Mr. Hadaway, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. There are no speakers on this particular next agenda item. Our action item is the approval of Vision 2015, streamlined, aligned, and focused for 2014-15. Dr. Harkins.
Thank you, Chair Porter. Actually, the board adopted Vision 2015, our strategic plan, in the 11-12 school year in May of the 11-12 school year. So that has been our guide, that has been our roadmap. What we did was we assembled a group of 50 people, actually people who are implementing the plan, to look at it, because this year is about the execution, or the discipline of execution, making sure that we're implementing the strategies in the plan. So we thought it was a time to really focus the same plan, but focus so that people could really execute this year. So really what it does is, it doesn't change the plan, it highlights what we value the most, and it communicates it very clearly. And what this will do is serve as the foundation for Beyond 2015, which is a process that will start in January. So what we did, if you'll recall from the presentation, is add guiding practices like continuous improvement and data-driven decisions. We set measurable targets. How much should we improve by the next year? We added a goal to focus area 4, which was about including as our most valuable resource our employees and their development. And then we made sure that on the same page, key indicators are linked to each strategy. So what you have, and the board has a large version of it that was included in your folders. What you have, you can in essence see the entire plan with everything that was included in it before, but on one page. So you see our four focus areas, and you see increased learning, and there are 3 big rocks in increased learning. The first one is differentiated instruction, that we have targets of what students are supposed to learn, assessments of if they've learned it, but really targeted, differentiated teaching to ensure that every student has that opportunity. The other big rock in increased learning is equitable learning opportunities, making sure that we're supporting the success of all learners. And the third one is early learning and intervention, so K-3, making sure that we're focusing early on kindergarten readiness and reading by the 3rd grade. Then in the second area, which is graduation and beyond, you can see the targets, you see key indicators under each target, but you see in essence 3 big rocks, that there are guidance and advisement structures so that each student has a plan, that there are career pathways and dual pathways, so there are pathways and programs that prepare students for college and career. And the third big rock in that area is making sure that we have transitions between grade levels, that from 5 to 6, from 8 to 9, and between schools, there's also transitions and programs. So what fits in here are the transition centers as students move from school to school or from alternative program back to the traditional program to make sure that learning is seamless throughout the system. Our third goal is stakeholder involvement and engagement, and there are 4 big rocks. Communication is a huge rock this year, and putting structures that we share information and priorities and policies, and we develop relationships. We have great partners that we work collaboratively with on the other big rock to provide career and college-focused opportunities that prepare students for the workforce and beyond. Our third one is student community enrichment, that throughout this community we have enrichment opportunities and interventions pre-K through 12 to extend learning, and that includes arts and service learning. And the third one is parent caregiver engagement, to make sure that we're engaging parents in the shared responsibility of student learning. So the leading indicator, for example, is the use of parent portal. And the fourth one, which now is broken into 2 goals, is safe, resource supported, and equipped schools. The first goal is that every educator provides effective instruction and response to student needs. So professional learning communities, which Dr. Hensley talked about, professional development that's aligned to the needs of the educators, and also we heard it at the work session, the educator growth and effectiveness system. Implementing that is a huge big rock for this year, and implementing it with fidelity so that we can see the impact and the result. So goal 2 is the safe, well-staffed, and well-resourced schools. The first one is create structures and budgeting that are aligned with district priorities. The second one are program services and resources, and getting a workforce of teachers that represents the diversity of our student population. And the third rock is intervention and response. Make sure that we have a coordinated system of interventions and responses to the student needs. So what falls in there are the student response teams, Louisville Linked, everything that surrounds students with the support that they need. So what we've done is taken the strategic plan, brought stakeholders together who've really implemented the plan, and talked about if we are really going to continue to focus and implement, how would we represent this plan so that we could more easily talk about what the priorities are. So we appreciate everybody's feedback, and we're presenting actually this revised, streamlined, focused Vision 2015 for the board's approval.
Thank you, Dr. Harkins. Are there questions? Ms. Duncan?
Well, I know I really appreciated the session I had with Dr. Dossett. And actually, I think more of my thoughts will go toward beyond 2015 than this document, because this one is pretty much done. But there are still some areas that I think we need to think about, and measures that we need to take a look at. Under the learning, increased learning, our goals are so strange to me that we expect our regular students to advance 11 points, but we expect our GAP students to advance 17 points. And I know we're trying to close that distance, and that's probably a worthy goal, but it doesn't feel realistic. And I know that's That's just the way this system is. But then K readiness, kindergarten readiness, to me, the kindergarten readiness is an indicator of the kids who are coming in. We only touch 35% of the kids coming in to kindergarten. So kindergarten readiness, I have trouble seeing that as an indicator for K through 3. So is there another measure that we have in mind other than K readiness? Because that was the only one I saw for K through 3. How do we know, how many, I mean, that's what we need to be tracking the improvement of. I mean, we want kindergarten readiness tracked, but that's the only thing that's listed to track K through 3. So is there something else that we should be adding in here when we look at this again?
Well, it actually says kindergarten readiness scores and primary assessment scores. So any assessments in grades 1 and 2 also, with the goal of, and again, key indicators are, if you're increasing those key indicators, you're going to increase your success measures. So if we increase kindergarten readiness, if we increase primary assessment scores in 1 and 2, then we will be better able to hit our target of all students reading at 3rd grade. So they're leading indicators, actually, key indicators to the success measure. So there are other measures, Ms. Duncan, besides kindergarten readiness.
Yeah, so that would just kind of help us know how on track we are to reach the other, to make the others head toward being on grade level.
That's exactly right. It's going to be hard to get to all 3rd graders reading at grade level if we don't continue to improve kindergarten readiness.
I know I'm a broken record on this, but I wish we have an organized way to get to the other 65% that we do not touch, and I think that's a significant number that we have to constantly be aware of, that we can't take care of that other 65%, which, I'm always dreaming of the day when we have universal preschool for our kids, and we can take care of everybody that way and start immediately keeping kids together so we don't have those big gaps that form. One of the things under communications I noticed, we want to increase the number and ways that we communicate, but it didn't say anything about with citizens. We primarily focus on parents, which we do. We want to increase the number of communications that we have with them and the ways that we communicate with them, but it's also important for us to communicate with our citizens. And I think next time around, I hope we include that in there, because there's so many people out there who support the schools, not by having kids in the schools though, but we need to constantly remember them too and include them in the information.
And 3.1 actually is broader than just internal stakeholders. It's community relationships as well. But I agree that as we move forward, we need to continue to emphasize that.
All righty, and just one other question. When we are talking about, and this is for next year, our funding, instructional funding, going from 54% this year to 55% next year, would you clarify that once again? Because I keep bouncing back and forth. What does that mean, instructional funding?
And Ms. Harden, actually on the dashboard, we had 2 bars, and one bar is direct instruction, and the rest is resources that go to school. So can you talk about the difference?
Instructional funding.
When you're talking of instruction, that is anything that is related directly to the classroom. It would be the teacher, could be a teacher assistant, it could be supplies, textbooks, but it has to do strictly with classroom instruction. Where you have school support could be maybe some additional assistance in the school level that is helping teachers in the classroom but aren't specifically in the classroom working directly with students. So instruction, that category is strictly classroom student instruction.
Do we have a goal on non-instructional support, the ones that you just named? Do we have a goal on that one? Or or is it just to keep increasing?
Well, to keep increasing to the level as far as what is needed. Our main goal is the overall instruction, along with instructional support, would be around 78% is where we're headed. That is typically what data has shown. Now, there's the difference as far as direct instruction versus instructional support, but those two categories together, we're looking at a 78% is where we're headed.
Okay, and you know, last time I asked if there were any other districts, when we say we want to be the #1 urban district in the country, what does the #1 urban district look like on that kind of a figure? Do we have any idea on it? I mean, how much do they devote to instructional support that way, or what's non-instructional support that goes really into the schools? But do we have any data on that from any?
We do, and we have looked at, you know, first of all, the schools that the state auditor had requested. We have looked at that information. In particular, we look at Austin, Texas is one that we use often to benchmark against. And they are in the 70% range also, the high 70s, as what we are headed towards. But we also have to look at what it actually makes up their categories and how their funding is. There are some districts, and I believe Austin is one of them, that textbooks, for instance, are actually funded at the state level. They're actually purchased at the state level. So you don't see those costs necessarily in that instruction number. So you have to really drill down and understand what is in each of the categories at each district that you are trying to benchmark against.
Okie doke. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. Ms. Haddad and then Ms. Westland.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to Linda was talking about early childhood, and I think the committee that we have together, and we're working with Metro United Way, we are working with the 4Cs, and we're working with all the daycares, trying to get them involved so that we are giving them information to take back, and we're holding these meetings and bringing parents in. So we are going out into the community. We're inviting the community, the governor's office is on there, the mayor's. Everybody is on there, Metro United Way, and the U of L's on there. So we're really trying to get everybody involved because it's going to take all of us, and you know, and we are getting some of those kids in. I know we take our buses around. I mean, our bus around and to get them in. So we do need, and we just got the Presbyterian Center that we're going to have more early childhood. So we are looking at different ways that we can do it, and I think we're coming up with a plan that's going to really be feasible and be able to work together to get the kids in the schools before kindergarten, because we need to do that. That's really, really, really important. Thank you.
Ms. Westland?
That's what I was going to say, is what Ms. Haddad already said, was just ask a question about preschool, and she pretty much covered it. But just about the daycare piece, and because we're not going to get everybody in a preschool seat for a few years, right? And that my understanding is we are working with daycares because the kids are somewhere, we can get information to where they are and help train those child care workers. Is that going on?
And there's really a collaboration between Metro United Way, Metro Government, and JCPS to really spread the word about what quality daycare and quality pre-K is about.
Okay. Mr. Jones.
I just want to follow up on Ms. Duncan's question about the instructional funding percentage. Is the 54% the same as the state auditor's calculation of what instructional funding was?
The state auditor looked at our breakdown, the one that is what KDE requires of us. So that percentage, yes, should be the same as what the state auditors. Now, I believe at the time they looked at it, I believe was 53%, if I remember.
Okay, but the definition
yes.
is the same of what
yes.
we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd like some clarification or more information about when we look at stakeholder engagement. strategy 4, you talked about parent and caregiver engagement, and we use parent portal to gauge some of that. But could someone talk about what we are in fact doing with pre-K, early childhood, and kindergarten? Because I'm not exactly sure that those parents would be using parent portal. So how do we know that we are reaching out and having conversations, and how are we getting parents engaged? Because it's a critical time as we talk about kindergarten readiness and reaching the goal for grade 3 reading level. So is there something that discusses how we are reaching early childhood and pre-K?
One way that we do that is through our Head Start Council, where we have parents who are part of that. So we haven't done a great job on gathering data, but that's been going on for a long time, where the parents are engaged in that. Another thing that we're doing that we're taking attendance on to see how many parents we can draw are concerted cultivation events, which is where we've partnered with churches and other organizations around Louisville to provide families with tips on how they can increase readiness. So we've brought parents in, we've actually had dinner for them and helped them see different ways, different strategies they can use to increase school readiness. So that's a couple of ways that we've done it. I'm not sure, other than the data we get from data management around early childhood, that we fully are gathering a lot of data around parent engagement at early childhood. That's something we really need to look to.
Okay, I would just ask that we, as we talk about things like parent portal, that we always reach back and talk about early childhood education. There are various parts of the community where we are concerned about that, and what we know for sure is if we make a better effort as students enter school and they're more prepared, then it cuts down perhaps on extended time learning as they get to elementary, middle, and high school. So I just did not want that to be said. I thought it was important that we bring that up as part of what's going on with early childhood education. And then I'd like to go back to a comment that Ms. Duncan made about increased learning, the 11% and the 17% gap. Does somebody want to talk about why? I mean, I understand why we are going for 17% for the gap students, because if we keep it where it is, we'll never get any better. So could somebody talk about that for a minute?
Certainly. One of the things we've really pushed for is the ability to name and claim students. And what's a part of that is a planning process that through professional learning communities, we identify students that are struggling. And for the most part, many of those students, the majority of them are our gap kids, the students that are a bit farther behind, and we're attempting to use strategies, everything from Attain, extending the school day, to intervention groups, to extra reading and summer boost, programs like that that will accelerate those students who are farthest away from the proficiency line. And so far, with all of our student groups going forward, we're moving those students toward the proficiency line. We still have a ways to go, though, to close the overall gap.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is to accelerate the growth and accelerate the improvement. What we need to do, and the whole point of going through the process of the strategic plan was to focus. Let's focus on the things that we know are working and provide the opportunities for students. So, and stop doing the things that aren't getting the results. So this is really an attempt to continue to narrow and focus our work, because we need to accelerate for the students that are behind. We need to accelerate and try to catch them up and work, as Dewey said, with more time and support.
Mr. Jones.
Just want to follow up on that point also, because Ms. Duncan made a really good point about the very high percentage increase and question the realism of it. In other parts of the kind of breaking down of the data that we got out of the recent state test results, we actually broke it down to number of students and made the point that we could actually identify them. Are these percentage increase goals the result of bottom up? You know, we broke it down, there are this many, you know, 800 students are in this or that grade, and we know who they are, and we have, you know, plans for them? Or is this a top-down stretch goal?
It's really, you know, a micro approach from inside the school. It's an inside-out approach, and that's really inherent in professional learning communities, where the teachers around the table collect data on the groups of kids that they work with and really try to accelerate for students that are struggling. And that's if you can picture a T-chart and the standard at the top of that chart, and figuring out which students are getting the standard and which students aren't, and developing what we call a DIP, a deep implementation plan that gets that group of students that aren't getting the standard moving forward. That's really, most importantly, teachers around the table. Now, we've done a lot of support things to provide them from the top down data that they need. We've created dashboards. We look at the academic supports they require with everything from Louisville Link to behavior interventions to whatever's necessary in order to pick those kids up. But I'm most proud that the capacity is being built inside the school with those teams of teachers doing a great job identifying the kids, developing plans they have the capacity to actually implement, and doing that deeply. I like to say the plan has to make it all the way back to the desk of the student. And when we do that for every student, we'll see all students continue to move forward, and those that have been most disenfranchised, they have the ability to grow the most and to move the most quickly.
But, you know, 34% to 51% is a, whatever that is, a 65% increase in the number of students who are proficient in those unduplicated gap groups. Each one of those students has a name, and somebody knows the name, and if we only get to 42%, we're going to be able to say who was missed?
Yes, that's that, again, that name and claim process. Yeah, we will be able to do that, and we do it really well. Principals have groups of kids that they've gathered the data on that tell them where they are, how they're progressing along toward college and career readiness, toward proficiency. We even use our 4 district-wide assessments to name and claim kids. So we know by the end of October, for example, about now, we know which students in the first set of standards that have been assessed, how they're doing and where they are right now in their progress, and teachers are making plans to developing plans to address their needs.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Westland.
I just wanted to make another kind of overall comment about this strategic plan update, because we're honing in over these years on exactly what we need to do to get more kids proficient and distinguished. Even now, we're going to be counting differently between getting kids from novice to apprentice, and all that's really good, and we're getting better and better at it. The question, and we've also mixed in with this discussion a question of resources. What's the percentage we spend in schools? And it's a different definition if we compare with different districts, if we include facilities, which we do need to have nice schools for our kids to go in, and that's pretty darn expensive. But it's not included if you look at the percentage of teachers, or you look at the percentage of supplies students have. There's really not a really good fair percentage, but there's a lot of people going around with their percentage out there. So the question is not so much whose percentage is right. It is, we have a strategic plan. We have now specific goals. We have staff who are highly trained. We have great progress we're building on. Correct? Correct?
Yes.
Dr. Hargens.
Yes.
Do we have, based on the amount of money we have and the flexibility that we have, the regulations we live under, the needs of every school, because schools that have higher needs kids get more money than students who have more middle class kids. Do we have the resources distributed appropriately to meet our goals? Would you change something, because this board is here to do that?
And actually, we do differentiate monetary support as well as other kinds of support to schools. So we have a per pupil spending that ranges from a school with lesser needs to a school with more needs. But what we're doing is we're actually have started the next budget process and looking for what are the things that we're spending on that are making the impact, and where can we spend more money on that, and what can we not spend money on that isn't making an impact. So which instructional programs or which things are we spending money on, so that we can even do that better and more, Ms. Wesleyan, to provide the support that we need to the students. And I think you always make the excellent point that we have students with needs in all of our schools, just not in some of our schools. So they're throughout the district, and we need to differentiate the support and the strategy, but also the dollars to follow those students. So, but we do that. We already do that, but can we do it better to accelerate progress? We're working on that.
So we can do it, so there are things I can decide now that we should do? I mean, my question is, are we doing now what we should be doing? Based on the information you have. If you learn something in the future, of course we need to make changes. But I want to walk away knowing I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and the district's doing what we're supposed to do to meet these goals.
Absolutely. The three parts of what we've done is we created a strategic plan. We created structures that support the strategies. This board put assistant principals to support teachers in the classroom in elementary schools, put goal clarity coaches in every school to support every teacher, provided millions of dollars of extended learning so our students that need extra time and support actually get them. So we have methodically done and have the dollars follow the strategic plan, but we continue to look at how we can align them.
Well, I would just ask that as you find more information about how we can align money better, we're all ears. Thank you.
Other comments? Is there a motion to approve the Vision 2015 streamlined, aligned, and focused for 2014-15? Mr. Jones, second. Mr. Hathaway, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our discussion items. The first item to be discussed is trends in staffing report. Dr. Hargens, if you'd like to introduce that to the board.
Thank you, Chair Porter. Remember, focus area 4 is safe, supported, resource, and equipped schools. And one of my favorite parts of focusing the plan is that our most important resource are our employees. That's where we spend the majority of our budget, on our employees. So Dr. Razor and Mr. Rosen are going to actually present the board requested staffing trends. So Dr. Razor will present the staffing trends.
Good evening. If you'll recall, there was a work session earlier this year in February where we discussed staffing trends along with several different parts of human resources. I want to take a second to review that, and then I want to give you some current stats as we have them, and then some future concerns and strategies that we have in place because of the challenges that we face. I'm sure you're going to have questions. As we put together this report, it spawned some questions of our own that we're going to be working on. In previous months, I've given several other presentations. I'd kind of like to see this presentation as one where we lay out some data. We give you some initial strategies that we may have, but I really see us coming back to you. Just to give you a little bit of a timeline, I made a presentation to you in February. At that time, we had the Director of Human Resources position posted. On the 7th of April, Mr. Rosen started his position as Director of Human Resources. And when he started, the staffing process was already in place. The recruiting process was already in place. So we're really just reporting to you what has happened this summer and where we're at right now. So I'd like to show you this as sort of a status report with some trends that we do have. So if you'll recall, in February, I came to you and I explained the staffing process, really the nuts and bolts of how we go through staffing for the year. We annually have a little over 3,000 plus applications, and typically there's 2,000 of those at the elementary level and 1,000 of those for the middle high school level. Again, as I told you then, at the elementary level, those are typically more of a general certification, and the middle and high school are more specific to a subject area. Then annually we've been hiring 500 to 600 people for the last several years, and we focus our recruitment efforts on minority hires and high needs areas, typically the STEM subjects as well as ESL and sometimes special education. So as we stand right now, and also I do want to preface, you're going to see 6,000 something several times, and that depends on the day that we pulled the data. We're always hiring, we're always filling positions, so you're going to see a variation of 6,000 up there. So if you have a question about why doesn't this number match, it's because the data was pulled on a different day. So last week, as we pulled the data, we had 6,658 certified teachers. You can see from the pie chart that approximately 93% of those are classroom teachers. Then we also have resource teachers, the Goal Clarity teachers, and other miscellaneous support staff that are also certified teachers. Our student demographics, as you can see, we are a majority minority district. We have 52% of our students who do not classify themselves as white, and 48% that do. Our teaching staff tells a grossly different story. We have approximately this year 15.35% of our teachers identifying themselves as minority, and 84.65 or 85% identifying themselves as white. You can also see over time, this is our trend and it seems to be holding. I can tell you, seeing this, I'm not satisfied with this. Mr. Rosen's not satisfied with this. Mr. Marshall isn't satisfied with this. We have to do something about this. As you can also see, these were our applications we received this year that were new. We keep applications on file other than just this year as long as they're current. Our new applications pretty much mirror our hiring. And you can see for this year, we hired approximately 15% minority, 85% white. Of our hires this year, as of last week, there were 522 new hire teachers since July 1st, really when our staffing happens after the overstaffs and things like that have happened. The average GPA of our teaching new hires was 3.54. The median GPA, which is the number in the middle of 522, was a 3.635. What that tells us, what we get from this, is we are getting a high caliber of college student from the teaching programs that we're getting from, and also that we're getting candidates where we can select candidates with a higher GPA. Also, there was a question for this presentation about the demographics of all of our certified employee groups, especially the school-based ones. In the principal position, you can see that we do a little bit better. We have 72% white, 25 or 27% African American, and 1% Asian. And once again, these are self-reported. At the assistant principal position, we're at 69% white, 30% African American, and 1% Asian. And then at the counselor, 68, 31, and just under 1% with one person. We just got the data today, about 2 hours ago, for the information about our 2014-15 hires. One of the challenges that we're going to explain to you in a little bit is we haven't had a mechanism in place to easily pull data for human resources. In other words, so if we want to find out what college our applicants went to after they've applied, we have to manually record that into a spreadsheet. The GPAs literally were manually recorded into a spreadsheet and then averaged. So right now you're seeing the 13, 14 numbers. What I can tell you is they're virtually identical this year. I just wrote them down before I came in. And we're looking at this year 26% from the University of Louisville, 8% from Bellarmine, 5% from UK, 4% from Spalding, 4% from Western Kentucky, 4.5% from IU Southeast, and 3% from Murray State. What this data tells me is just over 50% of our teachers come from a handful of universities, and the other 50% come from literally 1 and 2 offs. I could show you the whole spreadsheet and you'd see Indiana State University 2, Murray State 2, Morehead State 2. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but what that's telling us is we need more partnerships with local Kentucky universities. One of the reasons for that is we can guarantee volume. We can guarantee openings where many smaller districts can't do that. So we need to facilitate those partnerships. And the other thing that will be a great aid to this is, as you heard earlier, the professional growth and effectiveness system is going to be statewide. Every teacher candidate in Kentucky, everyone going through a teacher preparation program in Kentucky, is going to be getting trained in the Danielson framework, is going to be getting trained with what effective teaching looks like. This is an area where, even though we have targeted our recruitment, we need to widen our net a little bit. Teacher experience is also something that I wanted to show for this presentation. 80% of our teachers have 3 or more years experience. And that sounds impressive until you realize 20% don't. And that totals about 658 teachers this year with less than 3 years experience. If you look at the elementary, this isn't every elementary school, but you get an idea of the range that we're moving from. You're looking at just over 40% to, say, Fern Creek Elementary, where at the time this data was pulled, 100% of the teachers had over 3 years experience. In our middle schools, we're looking at about 76% with 3 years or more experience and 24% without. However, our priority middle schools have 42% of their teachers with 3 years or less and 58% with 3 years or more. And that range goes anywhere from about 32% to almost 90, or just over 90, I apologize. High school teacher experience is at 85%, 3 years or more. Priority, it falls down to 65. And then that range goes anywhere from 52% all the way to almost 100. Over 82% of our teachers have advanced degrees, and 18% of the teachers then currently just have a bachelor's degree. In Kentucky, you are required as you further your career to also further your education. But one thing this does show is that our teachers are outpacing that requirement. And then again, you can see this by elementary school. You go anywhere from almost 60% having an advanced degree all the way to 100%. Same thing in the middle schools. And you can also see the range in the high schools as well, from just over 60 to almost 100. However, what you do see is those with lower percentages of teachers with advanced degrees, again, that correlates with younger teachers at the schools. 308 of our teachers this year are national board certified. That's approximately 5% of our teaching staff, and that ranks us in 36th nationally. Here are the challenges that we see really from an on-the-ground standpoint in staffing. And we're going to start with some that are less 50,000 feet and more things we have to deal with on a daily basis. In Kentucky, teachers can retire anytime throughout the year. So we are in a staffing mode pretty much anytime throughout the year. It happened to my son's science teacher this year, retired at the end of September. The other thing we have looming ahead of us is the baby boomer retirement that could affect our numbers drastically. I believe we have just over 500 employees this year right now that could retire. And typically people don't retire the day that they can, but all of our positions we fill every year just aren't retirements. There are people who leave the profession, people go on to other things, people who move. So we're looking at basically our entire year's worth of staffing that could be just retirements. Something that we've worked to fix this year is something that we like to call the vacancy gap. And the vacancy gap occurs when a teacher gets promoted, when a teacher leaves, and that position just lies open. And multiple substitutes fill in. So something that Mr. Rosen has instituted is if someone gets promoted, they stay in their position until that position is filled from behind, which helps out with the multiple subs and things like that. And that's met pretty open arms, because even though the person who just hired the new person for an administrative position or for a Go Clarity coach doesn't like that very much, they've also been in the other situation where it's happened to them too. We also didn't mean to sound flippant with our next answer, but something that we run into in human resources, we don't hire teachers. We handle the applications, we work with the staffing, but many of the challenges that we face demographically, we have little control over after we've led the horse to water. So that is just a challenge for us, and I don't mean anything disparaging by it, but it's just a fact of the game here that we aren't hiring the teachers. A concern that all major, large and small districts have across the nation are the high needs areas. We just aren't graduating STEM educated students at the rate that we need to be, many career and technical positions at the rate we need to be, and then ESL in Louisville and other urban areas is burgeoning and keeping up with that as well. Minority recruitment, we're just not doing a good enough job. And that's something we know we need to improve in. Mr. Marshall, Mr. Rosen, and myself have been in discussions on how we could do that. We've looked at really targeting, and I think I talked with you about that in February, but re-emphasizing that, something Mr. Marshall's put together is a program called KS-LU along with Raymond Burst from Kentucky State University. This past year, I think we hired 2 Kentucky State graduates. We have a historically black college in our state, and we got 2 teachers from it. We can do a better job than that. And then, again, another in-the-weeds issue that we have from a human resources standpoint is substitutes. There are sometimes up to 600 teachers out in a day, and then as we have more openings and fill, also that pulls from our substitute pool. So that's a concern that we just kind of deal with on a daily basis, as well as finding qualified, good substitutes for the classroom. So any day that a teacher's out, it's just not a waste. I'm getting tired of talking, so I'm going to let Mr. Rosen talk about the strategies that in the last 6 months he's put in place and things that we're working on for the future, so when we come back to you, we can report our progress.
Thank you. After taking this office in April, it wasn't long before I figured that there was a number of things that we needed to strategize to improve our work output here. One of them I discovered when I applied for the position, that the applicant tracking system that we've been using is a failed system. It needs updating. We are looking at that, getting ready to put out an RFP to obtain a system like that, which will take some of these manual processes that we're doing now, expedite them, get them faster, get the time between application and hire a lot smaller, so that we can get those teachers and other staff on board faster. also more efficiently. The process, for instance, preparing this report today to come up with the GPAs, every one of those was done manually, entered onto a spreadsheet. Most of the applicant tracking systems that are available today will do this, have this information available at your fingertips, as well as have the applicants available in real time to be viewed by the principal, the hiring manager, what have you, so that they can look at that rather than waiting till the position's posted, closed, everything's gathered and slates sent to the schools. They can be done in real time to quicken the process. Another thing I looked at, I guess it was actually in the interview process, Dr. Razor mentioned the file room that we have. I said, really? We have a file room, like manila file folders for our personnel? Yeah, it's true, we do. We do not have electronic data for our files of our personnel. So we've got a room with 20,000, 25,000 files, folders. Makes it very cumbersome to look things up and have that information at your fingertips. So along with an applicant tracking system, it's imperative that we also adopt a electronic file system for the personnel so that we can track it and it can move seamlessly through from the application process, the hiring process, and then into the personnel folders, electronic folders, all of this being done paperless and quick and efficiently. As far as recruiting, there are a number of things that we need to improve our processes on. One of those is rather than simply doing the things that we've been doing, setting up at job fairs and visiting universities during the winter months for the recruiting for the May graduates, we need to reach out and actually source on our own, look for those candidates, contact them ourselves through the social media, through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through Facebook, a number of different ways that we can do that. And simply also advertising, simply putting posts on different websites that the applicants now are searching for, rather than waiting and putting ads and just simply going to job fairs and waiting for them to come to us. We need to go to them. A targeted recruitment along with minority applicants. Again, we don't do the hiring, but we can have some input into the applicants that are coming to us. After that, it's up to those that are doing the selection process to make the proper selection and choose the best candidates. But there are a number of things that we're looking at and we're looking to improve our processes on, well, starting now. This is a difficult period of time since we are sort of a year-round employer and we're doing hires of those that retire or leave the organization for whatever reason in between May and the December grads. It's a difficult thing to do if we come up now, for instance, someone's promoted to a Go Clarity coach and they were a science teacher or a math teacher in the school, it's very difficult to find their replacement. Yes, we have put the brakes on that and we're holding up on that promotion, waiting to be backfilled so that we don't lose that classroom teacher. But it's slim pickings out there, especially for the special need areas. But those are some of the things that we've started, we'll continue, and we've got quite a bit to do.
We'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or also if there's any other information that you would have liked to see that we can get for you as well.
Questions? Mr. Hadaway.
A little bit of information you can come back with is, I'm curious about those that get nationally board certified. Is there any trend data? Do they move to a Go Clarity coach? Are they moving out of the classroom? Are they moving to an administrative position once they get that national board certification? I know we pride ourselves on having a great number, and I think Dr. Harkins has shared how we compare to other districts our size, but I'd be interested to see if our national board certified teachers are migrating within the system or without the system once they get their certification.
We can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Ms. Haddad.
Yeah. Talking about the recruitment, I know what we used to do. We used to go, I know staff used to travel around to black universities all over the country. You're talking about just staying within this area. You're not going to be able to do that. You have to go nationally, but what they found that everybody in the country was doing the same thing. So it was hard to get some of the black teachers that we wanted to come here. So I don't know if y'all have done that, if you're just staying within, within the staff.
That's one of the things that we've ran into is we have about a 400-mile radius, but we're also identifying schools outside of that radius because one of the true assets of the historically black colleges and universities is they typically have very strong education departments and typically high-quality candidates. Now, because they have high-quality candidates, we get the situation that you described where we're not the only people they're recruiting, but I think we have a very attractive package. And Louisville does a good job of selling itself as well, similar to what Teach Kentucky does about selling the area. So something that Mr. Marshall and I have talked about is targeting other historically black colleges and universities that we typically don't go to, and trying to have more targeted recruitment, and then connecting and staying connected through social media, as Mr. Rosen was talking about.
Yeah. So do we have a large minority applications? Now I'm talking about Hispanic, not just minority, and different languages. We used to go out and get different languages also. When we started getting, we have 107 different languages now. So we even went over to, I can't remember the name where we went, but we brought teachers over to help us to teach. Are you looking at not just African American, but all nationalities at different universities? Now, I don't know if there are any particular universities that have more of those applicants, maybe like in D.C. or places like that where they have a lot of international studies and stuff.
We are looking to recruit English language teachers and ESL teachers, as that is, like I said, a very high growing population. I know that some federal regulations have changed regarding and I don't remember off the top of my head where it was that we used to recruit from out of the country, but that isn't possible anymore. But no, that is definitely an area that we're looking to recruit from.
And we need more than just the Hispanic. We need the Arabic. We need so many different. We have so many different languages. And I know in elementary schools in my district, we have a lot of Hispanic. They have 2 or 3 interpreters in those schools. So we need to be recruiting and having administrators that look like the whole population, because the population really is changing. Thank you. It's not an easy job, and it's because everybody wants the best. And so we used to go out early and do it. I don't know how early y'all go out, but since you have to hire all year, because teachers can retire the day that they were hired, and it might have been in December, January or something like that. So, yeah.
As I said earlier, I think having looked at this and now seeing the trend data over the years, especially where we're getting our recruits from, I think we can target better at all of our colleges. And a lot of people in education go to school to come home to wherever they came from and try to get a job there. But at the same time, I think we have a lot to offer. You look at the generosity of the board and the intentionalness of the Teachers Association in the way we've structured our compensation structure. I think we can recruit from those schools. I think we just need to be more intentional about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brady and then Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to piggyback on what my colleague is just talking about, and taking a slightly different track on that. And the fact that my understanding is that one of the challenges that we have at being an urban school district, and some of the challenges that some of our students are facing, is that we're getting teachers that don't really necessarily have, I guess, how should I say, effective classroom management skills, because when they're doing their student teaching, they're not necessarily facing an environment that is similar to a large urban school district such as ours. And you kind of pointed out to some of the universities that we're pulling from, and those universities are either in a rural area or maybe those teachers are doing their student teaching in rural area schools. So in regards to what Member Haddad was talking about, when we take a look at recruiting, not just from minority universities, but also taking a look at universities that might have those student teachers might be doing their student teaching in settings that are very challenging and that mirror some of the environments that the teachers are going to enter when they come into our school system. I know as a substitute teacher, a former substitute teacher here, that environment can be very challenging and can vary by school. And a lot of that determined sometimes by environment, by principal, just a number of different factors go into that. So it's just something that I know you're probably already on top of, but just something I think bears mentioning. And I've got two other points if you wanted to comment on that before I move on.
And I think also too, once we get them, that's where cultural competency plays such a part, and also where, not to say that PGIS is the end-all be-all of things, but where also when we define what good teaching and good classroom management looks like, and the other thing that Dr. Hensley talks about a lot is once we get PGIS in place, it really changes what our professional development structure will look like as well, where we'll almost have just-in-time, ready-made units for beginning teachers or any struggling teacher, say on classroom management, and that's where that peer observation can help so much too, where it's a whole lot less embarrassing for someone to say, hey, I need some help, and where a peer can come and look. But absolutely.
Yeah, I just thought if we were, recruiting from those tough school systems, that would be one less thing we have to kind of go back and catch up on. My second point out of the three is I understand that we're looking at the retention some of our priority schools, and I thought we had the CARDS program to basically, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's an incentive to have our teachers stay in these schools, and we're reimburse them for their getting their master's degree, or more or less a program to that point. And my question is, one, are we far enough along in this program to find out if it's an effective program, or do we have any good trending for that? And do we think that's something we want to try and roll out to not just our priority schools, but to those ones that are on that edge?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, this is our first year of the CARDS program?
The CARDS program, the cohort is in their second year. Some are close to getting their master's and their diversity literacy certificate. Dr. Harkins and I have been in talks. We started it on soft money, so of course when that soft money goes, we got to find some other outlets. But as far as the research has shown, they have all stayed in their very challenging schools, doing good in their schools. They're presenting at AERA, so we've gotten a lot of good results on it. But the training that they get is back at U of L, and it's not just in the College of Ed. So they're going over to arts and science, and they're going over to the humanities building, and they're getting some in-depth training just on culture and expectations, et cetera, along with getting richer training on how to design lesson plans that are more inclusive. But the preliminary outcomes we're getting, and that's with Dr. Shelley Thomas, and it was the late Blaine Hudson. We're getting some good information and some good data from U of L as they're tracking it. And they're going all over the nation presenting.
Okay, that sounds encouraging. I still think that's probably, if we're not even fully through our second year, it's too early to really kind of get a really accurate trend level, but it's something that I would like to hear more about as we progress through this program. Lastly, you had mentioned that you don't hire teachers. So I thought if you might be able to expand upon that and talk about who does hire teachers.
The schools and
what did you mean by that?
The schools and their SBDM committee hire the teachers. And like I said, I didn't mean it flippantly, but as we were putting it together, that's kind of how, when you think about everything we do, we facilitate the hiring of teachers with human resources.
I just thought that those in this room and the 2 or 3 that might be watching at home might want to know exactly what it is that we meant by that.
Yeah.
So.
And again, I thought that is an important distinction to make, the role that human resources in this district plays, and we get, by and large, good candidates in front of our schools. However, from what you see, I think we could provide a more diverse pool and a larger pool of candidates. I think part of what we've been spoiled on when you look at our data is we get enough. And again, I don't mean that flippantly, but we get enough to fill our positions, so we could be more targeted. When you look at a lot of the state universities, when you're getting 4 or 5 after, and we get a blessing of riches from the University of Louisville, but that's only a quarter of our students getting well over this year 120 from them out of 500. So,
all right. Thank you.
Ms. Duncan?
We've got 2 things going on here. We want highly qualified people, and then we also want the staff to reflect the diversity of the community. We talk about that. And it looks like we've taken the shortcut in administration, because teachers, that's where it starts. They're classroom teachers, and only 15% are in that minority African American category. and yet we have 27% in principals and 30% as assistant principals and 30, I thought it was 39 on the data that you gave us before, 39% African American counselors. So, you know, if we saw those numbers as suspensions, we'd all be gasping and saying, wow, that's really disproportionate. But I think what's happened is we just tried to make up for that so that we thought in administration we could be more, we could make it look more like the community, even though we didn't have the teacher pool to draw from. So, I mean, it's critical that we get out there and beat the bushes on recruiting minority staff people for this school district. We can't just keep promoting at the other levels and fixing this situation. If we had them in the classroom, you know, I think it would make a big difference in the behavior of our students and in lots of ways. So I think that's just a critical need. And when you see this down here run the same year after year, wow. And I appreciate your honesty, and you're looking at this data the way that everybody else would look at it, which is you know, kind of a shock that we are so understaffed in terms of minority candidates in the classroom. That's where it hits the road. You know, we've got to have in the classroom role models for our students, and that's where it's got to look like the community first, and then, you know, then we can, the others will look like the community as they go along, and we do, but if it's not in the classroom, you know, that we're missing something badly needed. But one thing I want to ask about, last year my grandson was caught in a situation of halfway through the year, the teacher was not able to complete the year because of lack of certification. And I don't think that was alone. I think that was, I don't think that was an isolated example. I think there were other examples of that going on. Have we plugged that hole so that because we want highly qualified, and then we're finding out we have people teaching several months, no qualification or no certification. So have we plugged that hole so that doesn't happen?
We try as hard as we can to plug that hole. I know that we give people multiple warnings. You know, let's just say, for example, that their certification was going to lapse and their licensure was going to expire or had expired, but they have a certain window to get it done. They get warning after warning after warning, you need to get this taken care of. And we know that, you know, we're warning them, we're letting their principal know that this is about to happen. And then as far as people who aren't highly qualified, we do the same type of thing with them. That is just one of those challenges that you face. Also, from your earlier point, I did some extrapolation this morning. If we doubled the number of minority candidates that we hired this year, we'd have 16.5% versus just under 16 right now. If we met our target and hired 52% of our new hires as minority candidates, we'd just be at 18% overall. So something that Mr. Marshall and I had discussed this morning and talked with Mr. Rosen about is what we want everyone to realize too is we're in sort of a deep hole. It's going to take a while to come out of this. So as you know, if we come back to you next year and you see that we're at 16.5 or 17%, that's substantial movement. And then over time, we've just got to make sure that movement continues.
Well, let me ask something else too related to that. Yeah, you mentioned applications a while ago, and one of the complaints that I've heard from people who have applied for us is that they apply and never hear from us. And you know, I'm just hoping that these kinds of things are going to be addressed pretty. You know, Mark just came in, so I know he's going to work on it. But when you hear people who, it's like it drops in a dark hole someplace and they don't hear anything back from us. And I hope that we get better at that we're able to at least respond to people so that they know. And sometimes it'll go several years and you know, that they get the impression that the application just went down to the bottom, that we're not having a system of bringing them up from the bottom, keeping them there. So, yeah, I mean, are we working on that so that we do have a system in place where we can, you know, let applications rise and we can communicate with people?
We do maintain the applications. I mean, some of those that we've looked at this year and actually hired this year had applied a year ago. And so we keep them. We don't close them out. It's an open-ended, for the teacher hiring, it's open-ended. It's not just one position. It's filled, closed, and everyone's given a letter that it's been filled. It goes on in continuity.
And you do.
And we were talking this morning too. I receive those phone calls. I know the superintendent gets emails that I then see. Mr. Rosen gets them. Sometimes Mr. Marshall will get them, or Dr. Hensley will get them. And that is the one, and I'm not an excuse maker, but Human Resources facilitates the hiring. I know that I had, in one example I can think of, an executive moved to town in one of the companies here in town, and his wife just happened to be a teacher, and she went through the application process, and I got several calls. Have we heard anything? Have we heard anything? And I looked, and everything was completely filled out. Everything was, her name was going out, but she didn't know it. Yeah.
And part of that communication gap would be filled with a good automated applicant tracking system that will automatically at the selection notify the applicants, notify them if they're missing a certification or any other document that's critical to the hiring process to close that, you know, contract readiness, if you will. So some of those things I'm sure are being overlooked and done because it's a manual process, and you know, we're humans, we can make errors and let those things lapse, and it does need improvement. And
the other thing it will allow a principal or anyone doing hiring to do is they'll be able to click on everybody's name who's on the list of, you know, anyone certified to teach middle school science, because the one thing that can happen is you can get fatigued, or you can look and say, well, that's 6 people, that's enough, and maybe you don't click down the list at a few people, but this way you'll be able to click, see everyone's resume, their experience, and go, oh, that's a good quality candidate, maybe I should give that person a look.
How do you say that that's a quality candidate? What makes that determination when they're coming from?
Well, you can sort on these automatic systems by any criteria that you want. You can sort it by years of experience, how many years in the teaching, you know, experience they have. You can sort by anything that is entered by the applicant at the time of the application process. So therefore, rather than looking at a slate, a list of 200 names and trying to pick the ones that you think want to come in, you want to invite in for an interview, you can do the sorting and get that list down to the top 3, top 5, top 10 that you want to then invite in for an interview based on whatever criteria you're looking for at the time.
Well, thank you. I just want you to know that we are aware of these things because we get those calls from people, and we are aware, and it is something that I want to be sure we keep up with, and we'll check back with you on periodically. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Ms. Westland, Mr. Jones, Ms. Porter. Ms. Westland.
Okay, I'll go quick. Couple of questions. Thank you for your report. You've mentioned the high needs areas, and forgive me if I missed everything you said. What are the areas that you're having trouble filling? You said math and...
The knee-jerk ones are the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as ESL and
special ed.
And special ed in some areas. ESL is really just keeping up with the burgeoning population, and it's a supply-demand type of thing in real time. STEM is a nationwide issue right now.
So,
and then, you know, in special education, again, ECE in certain areas.
And that's another recruiting challenge too, right? Are there any new things you all are doing or thinking about doing in that area, or anything you might recommend? You know, that's something that in our another meeting I attended about some of the situation around the state, and some rural counties are having lots of trouble getting, no different really, but a lot of need for math science teachers. And you all have any recommendations on more support for that, or how to do that? Or are you talking to the universities where we get candidates? Are they they need to do some recruitment going in there and trying to target people into those areas.
Well, I think you just hit on it. I think it's looking at the places we aren't getting them from, you know, and going to those, you know, when you think about the states, 4 states around us, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, Ohio, even into West Virginia and Tennessee, there's a lot of colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think with proper marketing, we're very appealing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, though, you know, if you're in Terre Haute, Indiana, you just don't think about Louisville, Kentucky until someone makes you think about Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, right. Any thoughts?
We have a two-page list here of these one-offs where we've gotten one candidate from schools such as Little Rock, Tennessee Tech, Transylvania, you know, Virginia Polytech, Vanderbilt, a number of schools from all over the nation. Mm-hmm. No, we can't afford to send our folks out and go to all these, but through the internet, targeted sourcing, yes, we can pick up 2 from each of these universities, or 3.
Double your numbers, as you said.
Exactly, and get a large variety of, you know, ones that we never envisioned by sticking to our 350, 400 mile radius.
Well, it'll be great to get updates. Sounds like you're on to re-energizing the effort to recruit in areas where needed, in every area which is really needed as well. I have one other question, and we'll move off that. Substitutes. You know, you hear that, you know, 500 or 600 substitutes needed every day. Of course, that's a few each school, and it's not like you have to find 600 teachers alone. You know, principals do that. Is it how does the trend look on substitutes? Are we having more absences this year? What's the?
It's more on certain days. It's held steady. We have trend data on that, and I wish we have the ability, and something I haven't looked at, and I was talking with Mark today about, and we haven't really thought about, is looking at who's absent and seeing if there's any trend as to who is absent
and why,
and why, and you know, and we're pretty liberal with a sick day. You know, we take people on their word that they were sick that day. Having said that, I have a feeling Friday is going to be a pretty rough day after Louisville plays Florida State Thursday night. Lots of illness, but
that would be. Let's hear that on November 10th. What the absentee is.
But
let's publicize that we're going to be looking at the numbers
it will be
for Friday.
It'll be above
on November 10th.
But the other thing, and I definitely don't want to stereotype or make a generalization.
Right.
But if we look at our trend data, and as you know, the baby boom generation is getting older, and older people tend to have more doctor's appointments. And
what?
Like I said, I don't want to generalize or stereotype, but when we see the people who were, you know, I think it will tell us a lot. It's something I haven't looked at, and I will share with you of who's missing. Is it 0 to 3 year teachers? Is it teachers in priority schools? Yeah. Is it who and where?
Well, and I don't want to be flippant about that, because I know having a benefit of needing a days when you need them is important. And, you know, the whole bus driver substitution is very, very difficult, because, you know, you got to get them out at 5 a.m. You got to have these people on call ready to go, and that's really difficult. So, but I just wondered if the trend was changing or staying about the same, and that's something that principals could probably help you do. So, okay, thanks.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First, I'd like to know what else we know about our teachers based on what school they come from. So, for example, do we know entering ACT scores by source school? Do we know praxis scores? Do we know retention percentage? Do we know where our STEM teachers are coming from? Do we have that kind of data by school?
We've looked at retention, and it's a mixed bag. And there's really not a red light going off on any school that we look at going, oh my gosh, every teacher we get from, you know, Bozo University, we non-renew. That is just, it's completely random when we look at our non-renewals. STEM, we could get. Praxis, right now, it's setting and entering numbers. As we get a automated system, we would have that. ACT is a little more difficult to retrieve. Sometimes, many times it's on a transcript. Sometimes though, it's not really. It depends on what the college, how they do that.
I mean, I've heard that the School of Ed at U of L, for example, ACT scores are about 10% below the rest of the university. And that's kind of the source of the questioning. You know, what do we know about the quality of the teaching pool that we're recruiting in? The answer is not that much, or
not as much as we could or should. But some of that there's limitations. Other is, you know, we can tell you the GPA that we get from a U of L student, which again, someone taking a teaching class isn't taking a pre-med class. I understand that. And you know, there's a variance in possibly in GPA there, but you could also see that we're not getting from U of L people with 2.35s that are barely graduating.
Right, we're being selective.
Yeah.
What about, do we have any engagement data? Do we have survey data about the teacher core, and again, correlate it back to where people are coming from? Or do we have any engagement data?
We have engagement data through the TEL surveys that are filled out. It's difficult to track that back other than looking at a school and then knowing who the makeup of a certain school would be, where that would come from. But that could definitely be something that we investigate and just take on.
May or may not be useful. So, yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing is that getting out of the Stone Age, which, I mean, Mr. Rosen, thank you for your candor in describing the file room and all, you know, all of that. I mean, I think it's shocking that we're in this kind of a circumstance, and I applaud both of you for, you know, getting on it. I think we've been through, and I've been one of the culprits in beating up administrative costs a lot. I think this is an area where we've got to make sure we're spending, and I would appreciate a report on the plan and the budgeted spending to get the software installed, to do whatever reorg and restaffing is required to have a modern HR workforce. So you can just send that along. Third point, Dr. Razor, you talked about deepening local partnerships because we have predictable volume. What did you mean by that?
U of L, we have a huge amount of volume. And then you look at the university, and I'm looking at last year's data because it's right in front of me. You look at the University of Kentucky, and we dropped down to just having 33 hires from them. This year, it's right on about that same number. You look at other schools throughout the state, and especially, again, not to say that we have a Louisville bias, but we probably have a Louisville area bias, the people who hire. And part of that comes from, you know, the product you're getting from U of L is probably what someone hiring would say. Now you know with PGIS that everybody's going to be trained in what effective teaching looks like around the state. But as Mr. Rosen said, and that's where the predictable volume comes from, every year we get 2 or 3 people from my alma mater, Indiana State University. And it's not that far away. Every year we get 2 or 3 people from Indiana University. It's not that far away. Those are places that we could do just a little bit more targeted recruiting and have, if we want to look at it from this lens, have fairly high minority participation in their education programs that we could possibly draw from. And then again, once you get out of the University of Louisville and Bellarmine, anywhere else around the state, just trying to engage that we could probably do for in a fairly cost-efficient manner.
So, you know, I'm going to draw on Ms. Westland's report from her Finland excursion. You know, she came back and briefed us all on the importance of teacher preparation and really the kind of the actions that were built around the insight, which we share, that an effective teacher is the most important element of the classroom. I suggest, you know, you think about going back to U of L with the same insight, and if we're hiring, I mean, we must be hiring what percentage of their grads? I mean, a bunch.
A bunch, yeah.
Big bunch. I mean, whatever we need to be specific, and it needs to be in these elements of teacher quality, what we really believe will bring our students along. So, but we're such a big customer of theirs that we ought to get some performance. And if not, IUS or wherever it is, there are lots of other places we could go. And then last, I got to call attention to the inexperience in our priority schools. I mean, is it a good thing that at night 70% of the teachers have been there for 3 years or less? Is that a strategic goal that we have to have that school have inexperienced teachers?
No, it's, and you could have both arguments. As a principal, I was a principal of what in Indiana would have been a priority school, and I had many young teachers. The plus of young teachers is they're yours to mold. The negative of young teachers is many of them are working on their master's degrees at night. You're evaluating many more teachers, as Ms. Armour and Mr. Young told you today. You know, the first 3 to 4 years, you're doing an evaluation every year on them, so that's very labor intensive. That really accented what the purpose of that was, A, just to make it visible, but B, accent our issue of the number of less experienced, I don't want to use the word inexperienced, less experienced teachers we have in our priority schools and the challenges that they face.
Yeah, I mean 42% of the teachers in the middle school, in the priority middle schools, have been there less than 3 years. That strikes me as, I mean, if you get better in the profession as you work there longer, that doesn't seem consistent with the idea that those are priority schools. And Dr. Hargens, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, and I think what we heard in the when we had the work session was it probably mirrors also the inexperience of the principal. So we have our least experienced principals and our least experienced teachers in the schools and with the students that need the most intervention and support. So that picture, those two pictures are not going to get us where we need to go.
So,
well, and that's why we tried to deliberate about incentives for priority schools, and that's what the CARDS program was designed to be, is how do you incentivize people to be in priority schools and stay in priority schools. And we talked about during the work session, you know, do people follow an inexperienced principal or do they follow experienced principals? So if you put a brand new principal, you're probably not going to get experienced teachers to transfer into a school with a new principal that they don't know, that doesn't have a track record. So I think we have ways to go in both regards, but that is the picture. The least experienced principals, the least experienced teachers with the students that need the most help.
I have one comment on that. Sorry, Mr. Jones.
No, it's good.
I'm thinking through the priority schools, and I'm thinking about some pretty experienced principals. So, you know, I can't think of all of them, but we need to make sure, because that's something you can do. If there's somebody not working, you all can make that change. And you may have trouble finding someone you could get and put in there, but that's not something you don't have control over. So if there's somebody weak, you need to move on it. And so I would say, and I will say, I'm thinking through some of the priority schools that are doing really well, and I want to say that I think most of our priority schools, because I can't think of all of them, have pretty good leadership in my view, because I'm seeing improvements and I'm seeing principals that have had some years of experience. So we need to be careful.
Well, and they're building a track record. I meant when they started in priority schools. So, and Dr. Radowski, at the end of next year, we have the possibility that 8 schools could move out of priority status. So that's a very good point, Ms. Wesleyan. They have worked hard in those schools and they're making progress in those schools. So when I say that, I don't diminish what they've done and what their staffs have done.
But, I mean, this is a national issue.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's a civil rights issue. It's a big deal issue. The inexperienced teachers getting to the kids that are doing the worst. And, you know, I think we've got to come up with some kind of belief structure that we understand. Either inexperience is an advantage and we're going to build on it. It's irrelevant, and that's all right. We've got something else, or we've got to do something about it, or we can't expect the schools to change if an effective teacher is the most important element in getting kids to learn.
But I don't think inexperience equals the reason that it's a priority school. It was a priority school, and now we've begun to staff them with other teachers who may be young, and they are getting their experience and they are getting their feet underneath them, and we're seeing that progress. I don't think we created those priority schools based on inexperienced teachers. I don't think that was the reason they became priority schools.
But if we're going to hit those numbers we just put out, that 34 to 51, those are the teachers who are going to do the work, right? I mean, the ones in place today. So anyway, it's good data. Thank you.
If I can make a quick comment about our partners, and if I miss one, then I apologize too. At the University of Louisville, Bellarmine, Spalding, Western Kentucky, where we get primarily the majority of our teachers. The point I was trying to illustrate is we get unbelievable numbers from those schools, and that's 50% of our teachers. Once you get on the other side of that 50%, you quickly get into the ones and the twos. So there are other partnerships out there that I think we could definitely leverage, and I definitely appreciate the comments, Mr. Jones, about the relationships we need with those schools as well, because we're a major customer of theirs, and in that regards, I think we can become major customers of a few other universities as well too, that might help us widen our pool as well as help with our diversity as well.
Ms. Porter. Thank you. She's still here. She's not going anywhere. Thank you for your report. I'd like for you to go back to slide number 7 that says percentages of white and minority teachers 2008 through 2014. That one.
Is that the one?
That's it. If I look at that, what I see is consistently no change in 5 years. And I heard you say that that was unacceptable. And it absolutely is. And I'm very concerned, as my colleagues have spoken tonight, that they are concerned also. And to have 5 years where there's no change, nothing that looks any different or any better for the good of hiring, I guess I have lots of questions. So here they go. You don't have to answer them all tonight, but here they go. What is our plan, short term and long term? And do we have a goal? So that, I heard you say if we hire X number, then it's going to run up to that. Is there a written plan? Is there a strategy? Is there something in place? Because we have talked about this when you went to the slide about if everybody that could retire does. We've talked about that for 25 years in this district. That's a fact. And I can tell you that because I was on the other side of the table for 39 years. So if all we're going to do is talk about it and not do something about it, we'll never be any better. We have to face it and we have to fix it, in my opinion. And I think that other people feel that we can be better with this, but this has been an issue. For 5 years, nothing has changed. That's not acceptable. So I think we need a plan. If we don't have one, I think we need a plan, and I think we need goals, and I think the board needs to see that quickly, because otherwise we'll be sitting here I won't, but 5 years from now, somebody will be looking at a graph and say, oh, that hasn't changed, or maybe it's just changed a little bit. So we've also talked about the extensive amount of time. I know we don't hire, but we process. So all of us here have heard about the extensive amount of time to process people. That needs to stop. That's not acceptable either, because people leave us and go down the road where it doesn't take an extensive amount of time. So there needs to be a strategy for that. How are we going to fix that? We've talked about, and I think you addressed the fact at the community conversation we had, There was a concern about school starting and staff not being in place, and so now there is a strategy. We don't move somebody until we have somebody that will take that spot. You've talked to us about the strategic geographic areas where we recruit, but what is the plan? What is the recruitment plan? Because there are people outside those areas that you have discussed that go to college to get a teaching degree. And for the people here from U of L, thank you for being here tonight. Consider us when it's time to have, when you're looking for a job. We're hiring in Jefferson County. So we'd like to see your application, and we'd like to process it in a timely manner. I think that's extremely important. So those are some things that are concerns for me. Where do we go to recruit? What is the relationships that we have built with these universities or wherever, conferences or wherever? I know there are teacher conferences. Where are we going, and what is our budget for recruiting? How many dollars do we have designated for that? Is that enough? Does it need to be more? I think these are some things that the board would like to look at. As we talk about what plans are, I'll go back to the 5 peer districts. I'd like to know what their recruitment strategies are for the 5 districts that are supposed to be our peer districts. What do they do to recruit? So we can see what others are doing. Not saying that we're going to be doing what they're doing, but what do other folks do? Because we've got a problem. We've had a problem, according to this graph, for 5 years and more that are not on here. The other question I have that I'm sure others have heard, how would you respond to this? Which is, I've gotten this question every year that I've been on the board. During my child's educational career, K through 12, he or she sees less than 5 teachers or administrators that look like her or him. And I'm talking about me. How would you respond to that?
I would say that's a tragedy.
So we have a problem.
We do have a problem.
So we have some things that we must fix. You know, I appreciate your honesty with the report. I will say that. But I will say that I am extremely concerned when I say, what is the plan? And you're looking at me like,
I was waiting till you were finished. But
okay. Okay, well, tell me what the plan
well,
is.
the plan is, honestly, what you said, Ms. Porter, what we're doing right now isn't working. I'm not saying people aren't working hard. I'm not saying people aren't getting results. They're not getting the right results. When you look at that sickens me, because we say in our strategic plan that we want a workforce that mirrors our student population. That mirrors the student population of Finland or Germany or somewhere. That's not here. And Mr. Marshall and I were talking about that just, well, the other day and just today as well, with what we're doing isn't working. Something that Mr. Rosen and I have talked about is looking, because you mentioned our recruiting budget, is where we spend it. We go on recruiting trips, and again, not to speak for Mr. Rosen, he started right as this was in full swing. So we've looked at this, and we make some major recruiting trips to universities all throughout Ohio. If you look at our numbers on what you got, we're getting onesie twosies there. There's really not a bang for the buck, and those people may have been from Louisville anyway and came home. So what I can promise you is we will have a targeted improvement strategy for recruiting not only minority, but recruiting for high needs areas, and also just to widen our pool. As I asked and introed tonight, this is sort of a state of where things are. If we're sitting back in front of you next year and we're giving the same presentation, that's unacceptable. But we will have a better plan for you. Again, I think there's been people who've been working really hard, but what we're doing is not working.
And I guess I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your response. And when we look to who is responsible for this, we're looking at the 2 gentlemen that are responsible for this. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's important. So thank you for your honesty. thank you for the answers that you've given tonight. I look forward to seeing what the 5 peer districts are doing. In the paper today, there was an article about recruiting in Silicon Valley as it pertains to diversity. And there was something in here that I thought was very interesting since we're talking about this. And the gentleman said that they had a very aggressive recruiting program at the collegiate level. And they did a good job of eliminating risk concerns many people had. So they also said that diversity does not happen naturally. So what we must do is we must focus, we must develop a plan, and we must execute the plan. And we have done wonderful work with plans and timelines. So I am asking, as one of the board members, one of 7, that you come back to the board with a plan that we know what will happen and when it will happen. Welcome to JCPS, Mr. Rosen.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
There's lots to do. And I tell you, I will not be satisfied. I'm going to ask for these numbers all the time, because if we don't face it, we will never fix it. And it's gone on this way far too long. That's all I'm going to say about it. Thank you for your report. Are there any other questions? Mr. Hadaway.
Yeah, just to, when you come back to us, one of the things that I was going to ask in the board request was, I too am interested in our 5 peer districts and how they attract minority applicants. And that's why I wanted to highlight the ACES program. It's very encouraging to me. No doubt the demand is probably higher than the funding. And I'd be very curious on some national data on the racial tapestry that we see in education departments throughout all our higher education colleges and universities across the country. Surely we have some national data that we can find and see what's going on there, so we know what pool we're trying to tap into as well.
We can also, through the Council of Greater City Schools, see what the staff makeup looks like in all of our, not even peer districts, but all the major large urban districts as well, so we could benchmark against that.
Yep.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to receive the report on trends in staffing? Mr. Jones, second. Ms. Haddad, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your hard work. Next item on the agenda is the 2014-15 Board of Education discussion agenda planning calendar. Is there a motion to receive the planning calendar? Ms. Haddad, second. Ms. Westland, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Board reports and requests, and we do have one speaker, so I'll ask for board reports. Mr. Brady, Ms. Haddad. Mr. Brady first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say, give out a shout out to some folks. I want to say thank you to J-Town High School for hosting my community conversation this past week. It was very nice, and also our communication staff for putting that together. It was a sparsely attended event, but the conversation that we had there was really meaningful, and we got a lot out of hearing some of the feedback. Also want to say thank you to the 15th District PTA for putting on the school board member or school board candidate debate this past week as well. That's an important service, and I just want to go ahead and call that out because I think that's something that really benefits the community. Additionally, 2 more thanks is I want to say thank you to Attorney General Jack Conway for coming out to J-Town High School to talk about the dangers of, distracted driving and impaired driving. It was very nice of the AG to come out and talk to our students about that, and also for J-Town again for hosting that event. Lastly, I also want to thank everyone who came out for all the schools and the principals and the staff, as well as the administration that came out for the Showcase of Schools. That was also this past week. Very busy time in JCPS. So I think there's a lot of folks had, once again, it gives us an opportunity to be able to talk to our parents about our middle schools and our high schools. And our elementary showcase will be coming up soon, so more on that in a moment. Now, I do want to take one moment of personal privilege if I could, and I need to talk to the camera guy back here. And I need you to zoom in for just a moment if you can. I see a monitor. I'm hoping that you can zoom in on me. If not, I got another guy over here. Whoever's going to zoom in, I'm looking at the monitor. Okay. So This is directed at one person, and as I said, as a point of personal privilege to me, I want to say happy anniversary to my wife, Deanna. Tonight is our anniversary. I'm here, and I thought this might be better than the card. So I want to say I love you. No, probably not. Good point. But I want to say thank you for 12 great years, 2 wonderful boys, and I look forward to many more. And I just want to say I love you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady.
Sweet.
Many more boys?
No. Many more years. Many more years. Let me be very clear.
He many more boys. That's what I heard.
Many more. I have to say many more years, honey. Don't worry.
Moving right along. Ms. Haddad, did you have something?
Yeah, there's a great article in the paper yesterday morning with Roger Markham, Mary Gwen Wheeler, and David Karam talking about the facts about Kentucky's improving schools. And I'm going to read this one because it's very important. They said a lot of really good things in here about what Kentucky's doing. And it said, of course, Kentucky still has a long way to go to reach its goals of all students proficient in college and career ready. However, it is a disservice to the public to pass on inaccurate and inappropriate information. To do so damages not only the image of Kentucky, but most importantly, it also damages each and every student in our public school system. And I have to add to that all our teachers and administrators who work very hard every day. It is time for all of us to work together on behalf of our schools. Public education is much too important to be used as a political football. They did a great job, and David, be sure and thank Mary Gwen. Personally, I think it's wonderful because they work statewide. They see some of the issues. They really are the ones that see the whole picture like we do. And so I thought it was just a great thing for them to put in there. So be sure and tell her. Thank you very much because it's, they're very involved and they really know what's going on. Thank you. Well, would you have changed it?
Thank you, Ms. Haddad. Ms. Duncan?
I had made a request, I think, last time, and I did not remind anybody, so I'll request this again. Just curious about the Phoenix School data on who showed up for Phoenix at Myers and who showed up new. Who went
Actually,
over?
we have that, Ms. Duncan. We just didn't send it.
All right, very
so
good.
We have it.
That's,
we'll send it.
That's all right. Oh, thank you. I just forgot to ask, follow up and ask on it. I know I've had a pretty busy time, but I went last Friday. I attended Blue Lick's Fall Festival, Blue Lick Elementary's Fall Festival, and saw tremendous parent engagement in all of those activities there. And I had a great chance to be a part of the planetarium that they brought out to the school, which was I think it was attracting huge crowds while I was there. Debbie and I worked on the legislative agenda, and she talked about that a little bit earlier. Was kind of surprising of the number of things that we differ on in this legislative agenda. There are things that we are alike on, but there are also things from KSBA that their point of view is a little bit different than ours, and that was an interesting exercise. Attended the Neighborhood Place annual meeting, and one of the best sessions I've ever been to on cyberbullying was conducted by a debate teacher. I think it was at Elizabethtown from one of the high schools there. But it was a phenomenal session on cyberbullying, and I had no idea of all the ways, let me count the ways that kids can bully each other on the use of their cell phones and the computers. So that was a wonderful session, and also enjoyed very much Fern Creek High School's jazz band, which performed for us during lunch. And then finally, I had the assignment of talking to kindergarten, first grade, and second graders at Hazelwood Elementary on Friday afternoon during their Citizen of the Month program. And my task was to talk to them about leadership. And that was quite an experience for me. I said it was the hardest thing I think I've ever tried to prepare for, because you know how long they want to listen to you, and you have to be careful how you even talk about leadership with them. But it was so great. The program was so great, and all those kids receiving awards for being outstanding citizens and leaders within their classrooms. That's my report.
Mr. Hadaway, and then Ms. Westland.
Thank you. I know when we get a report back from Dr. Razor about attracting applicants and expanding our net, it made me think more about really our whole marketing thing. When you mention marketing, it's a wide net. I think it would be, for instance, I know there's some work being on the website, and I would like to know if we have an SEO specialist that helps out. But it made me think even something that'll be helpful for us probably falls in your lap, Helene. I don't know just yet, but where we are in our marketing, revisiting our touch points that we have with the community, the publications, the digital media, the TV, whatever. I would love to see that in a report at some time too.
Ms. Westland?
That's good. That's a good point. We haven't really talked about that recently too much. Just a couple of things, and if anybody wants to hear details, I'm happy to share, but I did join Linda in Frankfurt on last Saturday, on the committee with KSB going over their legislative agenda. And I'll just say broadly, I think we all agree on funding. We talked a lot about the retirement system and how to fix that. They have some specific things. Generally, KSBA watches mandates on some small districts. There are real onerous things that they have trouble dealing with, so they're really watching a lot of details, and they support Common Core standards. So there are a lot of things that we're the same on, and that was a good discussion. Their board, on which Linda sits, will approve their agenda in December. I also attended, for the last time for me, the local school board member advisory council with the commissioner, and we talked about Ken Drought went over the accountability results statewide, went over some of the decisions to change accountability, how they're going to look at achievement a little bit, give that a little more of a weight, which I think principals are happy about from what I've heard, and giving some more points for moving kids from novice to apprentice, which is also good. Ken talks about the whole accountability system as a group of incentives, which, you know, I understand that a little bit. But the other thing, which really matches what Mark and Mike talked about, and you're working on it, Bob, and that's the human resource management, equitable distribution of highly qualified and effective teachers and leaders, which is the Harvard project, and we had about a 10-minute presentation on that because we were out of time, but it sounds like they're going to do some deep work with you, and that will really help, I think, add to that discussion about getting quality teachers and administrators where they need to be, and so that's what we talked about. So that's that. I'd be happy to share any materials with anybody who wants them. Thanks.
Thank you. Just want to quickly recognize the fact that last Thursday night we had somewhat of a closing ceremony for the Bingham Fellows, and I was privileged to be a member of the class. Ms. Westland was there, Vice Chair Jones was there, and our topic was West Louisville. So as we talk about early childhood education, the team that I am working on is we're working to increase kindergarten readiness in zip code 40210. And yesterday we were at Victory Park making 17 front yard libraries where the community can go into front yards and help themselves to books and put them back wherever they want to increase reading in that area. And I'd like to thank JCPS for being there to support our efforts. Dr. Radowski, you've had folks in place helping us, and Karen Branham and Kevin Nix are working with us. We will continue to work on that. That is, as we increase in 40210, we plan to go to 40211, 40212, and up to 40203. So the Bingham Fellows is a wonderful opportunity. It was not an expense to JCPS, so don't start sending me any emails. It was not a district expense, so I want to share that because it's another educational opportunity, and as we talk about community engagement, the room was packed. so that we have a community that cares not only about education, but about hiring and about moving this community forward. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. It was a wonderful learning experience for me. I will continue to work on it because it is important and we must be successful. So that's the only thing I wanted to report on. Thank you. I would now like to say that that takes care of the board reports and requests. We have one person to address the board, and that's Deborah O'Gorman. Ms. O'Gorman, Deborah O'Gorman. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. You will have 3 minutes to address the board.
I've talked in front of the city council quite a bit, so it's only 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I have to go through this. 3 minutes to address the board. 2.5 minutes, you'll hear a bell. At the end of 3 minutes, you'll hear the bell twice.
I'm sorry. Do I need to sit?
You may sit or stand, whatever you prefer.
Over there? I didn't know. As I said, I've never been.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Well, there's a lot of things you all brought up that I got ideas that you won't believe. Let me introduce myself. My name is Deborah O'Gorman. I run a support group for epilepsy. Epilepsy into my life at the age of 30. I lost my job, Humana, Columbia Healthcare, for kissing my boss. People say, you walk, you talk, you kiss your boss. Yes. People don't realize there's 30 different types of seizures in the Commonwealth, 30 different types of seizures in the world. Kentucky's the largest state with epilepsy. That's why we have Norton Neurology. There's 255,000 people with epilepsy. The electricity is the major trigger because coal is run by LG&E, with LG&E. I have a lot of children that come to me at the state fair and parents come to me. I have a lot of young girls with epilepsy. I'm sorry, the menstrual cycle is a major trigger. That's why they stopped doing hysterectomies in the United States 5 years ago, unless a woman has cancer, other issues. We cannot take birth control pills, we can't use tampons. And the children get teased at school, teased. You brought on the nurses issue. I'll fight for you for that, anything. Because schools, Barry Barker, he's had me train TARC bus for 17 years, and I'm on the transportation board. I have a computer on my heart called the vagus nerve stimulator. I was the first patient with it in Kentucky. I make everyone wear this. It's called a medical ID. If you don't wear this, then you don't get a disability check. I don't want anybody to know I'm epileptic. Then wear this. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb from seizures. Alfred Nobel did all his, and they get $14 million a year for the Nobel Peace Prize. We have a lot of African Americans, but they do not know that Harriet Tubman was digging the Underground Railroad, got hit in the head, and she's still freeing the slaves. This is what I teach my children, and I teach my adults. I'm invited to a lot of the schools. A woman came up to me at the state fair. She thanked me, and I said, why? She said, you teach so much, and you're straightforward. Yeah, that's my problem.
You have 30 more seconds. Go right ahead.
Her son was at school in Jeffersonville. The kids were teasing him. She came home, he hung himself. So now she's making these. We are offering this. November is Epilepsy Awareness Month. U of L, UK fans. November 8th, we got Rick Pitino, Calipari, Petrino's footballs at U of L, 4th Street Live, and we're having a silent auction. Starts from 2 to 4.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here tonight. There are no other speakers tonight. We are not scheduled for an executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Hadaway, second. Ms. Haddad. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Yes.